And then I one day was like, wait a minute. I like called my mother. She laughed at me. I was like, I just realized I could illustrate them. No one's going to stop me. I don't have a publisher. She was like,
It's okay. You're allowed to do that. I'm running with scissors.
no one's going to stop me. I did then start illustrating my novels. They're not, every page is not an illustration. But my kind of the sections, I split them up into the parts, each have a big illustration, and there's a map and the illustrated chapter headers that go along with it and all of that. And like that really is fulfilling to me as a writer and an artist and a storyteller to be able to like have all this tied together.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sarah Rosette.
And I'm Jamie Albright. And this week on the show, we have
Hanna Sandvig.
Yes, we do. And it was such a fun interview. Really interesting. I learned a lot, actually, in that.
Yeah, me too. And Hanna does illustrations, and she's also a cozy fantasy author. And we talked a lot about special editions and working with artists and her business, how it's changed over time. And it was a great interview. We talked about Kickstarter. Can't say it. Talked about Kickstarter and Patreon. And she also has a sample contract for working with illustrators. And that's in the show notes. So we talk about that
Love
too.
That's really going to be helpful. Again, we are not attorneys.
That's right. No, you probably wouldn't mistake us for attorneys, but just in case.
And if you do, we need to talk. Yeah.
So how are you?
I'm good. I'm writing very, kind of sporadically and slowly, but I am writing, and that's all I can hope for at this point. I did want to mention Andy Arndt. She's a narrator, kind of my narrator girl crush, and she's on the podcast about a few weeks, I think she's scheduled for, and I'm so excited. But she sent a message to me that she had listened to the podcast where we interviewed the author assistant, and she thought it was really interesting. But the author assistant talked about finding free audiobooks on YouTube, and Andy just wanted us to point out that we didn't clarify that she meant authorized uploads and not pirated uploads on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube and you're listening to an audiobook and it said, "This is Audible," that is not an authorized
edition or whatever.
So just FYI, put that out there because I wanted to. Last week I meant to say it and forgot.
Just clarify.
So I just wanted to clarify. Yeah.
Because some authors do put their audiobooks up on YouTube. Some authors who, if you have the rights, you're able to do that. But just always double check because you just want your listens to go to people who are actually legitimate. So
exactly. But that and that's really all I have. I've sort of pared everything down to just trying to write a book. I probably won't have money to properly promote a book until the summer. After my swimming lessons. So that's sort of what I'm shooting for. Like if I could get something out in the summer, I would be super, super happy. So, fingers crossed.
It's a good goal.
Looking like that could happen, even though I'm writing sporadically, I'm still writing, and I'm writing about a chapter every time I sit down. So that's great.
That's good.
Yeah. And, well, not about a chapter. I am writing a chapter. They're short. I mean, it's first draft. And I'm feeling good about it. It came to me, and the entire thing came to me. So that's
always good.
Really before. So I'm just sort of dictating what came to me. But it's still so hard. I mean, it's just hard for, sitting down to write is hard for me anyway. And then having not done it for a long time is super hard.
Yeah, it takes a while to get back into it. And I get that. Yeah.
But other than that, I think I just, hey, listen, I will say this. If you're on TikTok, and you don't follow me, please go follow me. I am 30-something people from 10,000 followers.
Ooh.
And I really want to hit 10,000 followers. Like, as a little girl, all I want is to have 10,000 followers on.
It's a lifelong dream.
Little girls' dreams come true. Yeah. So anyway,
That's funny.
how about you?
Well, I have been sick, and whatever's going around,
Yeah.
it's like this flu type thing that the fatigue is just terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, my husband's had it and he did the same thing. And it's like, I'm actually feeling better. But then the last couple of days, I've gone in my office, sat down, looked at my computer, and just stared at my computer for a while, and then just gone and laid down because it's like my brain just isn't there. I've never had this happen. It's very weird.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I've been exposed to the flu now 3 times. Like, not just a little exposed, like in my face, people drinking after me exposed.
yeah.
And over the last 3 weeks, and I have not gotten it yet. So if I don't get it, y'all need to study my immune system, because snotty kids have been right in my face, drinking my water and everything. But so far, no, but it's bad. It's bad.
It is. It's pretty bad. But
I know is just miserable.
I know. And it's like a really long, like the fatigue is really bad. So my husband kept saying, just don't worry about it. Don't try and write. Just do nothing for a little while. So that's what I've been doing. And today's the first day that I've actually felt more normal. So maybe next week I'll be back into it. But I did want to mention we're recording this on Wednesday. The podcast for last week just came out today. So we've already had some people respond back. We wanted to know what y'all wanted. And we've already had some text messages. And so thank you for that. Thanks for letting us know what you're interested in, and just for being excited about the podcast. And
yeah. I mean, we weren't threatening to stop.
That's right. We're not holding it over you.
Not shouting into the void. That's really it. We want to know we're still giving value and helping. And so, yeah, we appreciate you so much.
We do. Yeah. So, and we don't have any new supporters this week, but thanks to everybody who continues to support.
Yeah.
And hopefully once we get back in the routine, we'll have some more supporter stuff for everyone.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is all we've got this week.
Yeah. So we should get on with the interview.
Yes. All right. Here is Hanna. Well, today we are really excited to have Hanna Sandvig with us. Hi, Hanna. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing good. It's fun to be here. I love to listen to you guys, so I'm excited to come hang out.
Well, thank you so much, and we're so glad you're here.
We are. So let me read your bio and we'll get going. Author and illustrator Hanna Sandvig loves to create cozy fantasy stories with sweet and swooning romances and enough sass to keep things interesting. Hanna is living out her personal happily ever after in the mountains of BC, Canada, with her husband, 3 daughters, and a giant cat. If you drop in to visit, please bring plenty of chocolate and strong black tea. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it does. Actually, I was just in the clubhouse room that I'm in every morning, and we were just talking about cozy fantasy and how that's probably the next big thing, maybe. So you're on the right track.
I was writing it before it was cool, so I'm just lucky that the market is like excited about it now.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. Well, tell us how you got into working with writers.
Well, actually, my mother is a writer. My mom is Valerie Comer, and she writes Christian contemporary cowboy romance. It's a lot of C's. And she was working on her first self-published novel back in, I think, 2014. And we're looking at stuff, and I was like offered to do the cover for her. So we did a little bit of back and forth. We were doing illustrated covers before. It was cool to do illustrated covers.
Yeah.
And I had been illustrating freelance a bit before that. That's also about when I was trying to transition from, I had been a lifeguard for years and then had my little kids and wanted to stay home. And I was trying to figure out how to get, the illustration stuff going. And I just love to read. So working with books was wonderful. And I love doing covers. So then just through that, and then when I started writing my own stories, I just got really excited when I saw how she was doing, and that indie publishing was just a way that you could actually, put books out and people would read them instead of the sort of lottery of traditional publishing. Then I just started to meet other authors. So I got into doing illustration work for other people because I was hanging out in the author spaces and making friends, and it just worked out really well.
That's great.
Took off from there, yeah. So you've done some maps for me, like a long time ago. That's how we connected. And I think it was your mom who posted about you in a Facebook group or some group I was in. And I was like, oh, I needed an illustrator. So that's how we connected years ago. So I love to put illustrations and maps in my books. And readers love them too. Mysteries, they love the illustration. So yeah, I think that's pretty funny that it was your mom that connected us.
I love that, though.
It's so good. It's funny, too.
A little nepotism never hurts.
A little networking.
We've gotten some of our best actors that way.
Yeah.
We have occasionally share readers. We're so different in our genre, but it's always funny. And every now and then somebody doesn't realize. And I was like, that's your mother? And I was like, yeah.
That's
like,
funny.
look at the covers of her first few books. Yeah.
It would be nice, though, to have someone in the business in your family who could understand. I mean, because, we
really
talk about
is.
this all the time about how you can talk to your family. And like my daughter that edited the podcast for quite a while, she worked for Michelangelo's company, so she does understand some, but she still doesn't get it as an author because she's not an author. So yeah.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's still every time we get together, I'm like, how's your project going? Where are you at? Like, what are you stalled on?
Yeah.
And we, it was so helpful for my first book. There's just so many things like, how do you get an ISBN and how do you upload and like all that stuff. And she walked me through everything, and it was amazing. So
yeah, you don't mind asking your mother for help.
I know. Well, and I did her covers for her, and I'll do graphic work and stuff. So it wasn't like
it was.
So you're helping each other out.
Yeah. I mean, she did also pay me, but
yeah,
it was good.
Yeah, that's good. Well, what do you wish that authors knew about illustration? Because that's something that most of us feel very uncertain about, like how to go about even finding an illustrator, all that stuff. So what do you wish authors knew about that?
I think that the biggest thing is that you need to find an illustrator who is going to be excited to draw for you, which is kind of like a tricky thing, but illustration is, it's creative, right? So you want to be feeling it. You can force yourself to draw something you're not super into, but it'll never turn out as good as if it's really something that you love. So I think it's good to look at portfolios of authors, illustrators, and really choose somebody who already does the things that you want them to do. There's a lot of illustrators who are really good at drawing people, but might not draw romantic couples ever. And if you look and you're like, so if you ask them to give you a romantic couple, it might turn out okay, but you might not get that feeling that you're hoping for, right? Or if you you have fantasy books or romance that focuses on the fashion and how beautiful the dresses are, what the guys' clothes look like, and you hire someone who doesn't show a lot of interesting fashion, you might not get a great result out of it for that because that's just not their strength.
Right.
So I'd like to look mostly on Instagram these days, honestly. I follow a lot of artists on Instagram, and you know how Instagram is. It'll show you more kind of what you like. So I also share a lot of illustrators in my stories because I think that keeps feeding the algorithm to send me more illustrators. Because even though I do my own illustrations, I also, I love art, and I definitely love to hire illustrators sometimes as well. It's just fun. But yeah, you look for someone who has the vibes you like and is already doing the sort of art that you like. And then my other advice would be to look over all their art for the past year or so and look at what you think is the weakest illustration and ask yourself if you would be happy with that.
Oh, that's a great one too. Yeah.
Because a lot of times people are like, oh, I saw they could do this, and then I was disappointed by this. And then I look at their portfolio and I'm like, well, sometimes you just have a piece that turns out really good. You can't hope that you'll have the best ever result from an illustrator because that's just not how it works.
Right.
So you got to look at the worst one and be like, is that one still really good? Because different artists are at different stages of their growth and their consistency across like the work they do. And you really do have to look at all of it to see what you think about it.
Yeah. It's interesting because a friend of mine, she had a cover that she was working with an illustrator on, and she about the vibe thing. There was like this artist was really good at drawing kind of that passionate moment between a couple, and she was showing us. We were kind of helping her critique the what needs changing, what not, and but there was it's a male romance, and the guy has his hand around the other guy's kind of neck, right here.
Yeah.
And it is so passionate, like that one, like the way she drew his hand, the way the head, like there were problems with the whole thing, but that one aspect of the photo or the image was so powerful that we just kept, she was like, should I start over? And we're like, no, like she can fix this other stuff because that is so beautiful and so powerful that you don't want to lose that. And so, yeah.
Yeah. An illustration can really emotionally connect really quickly, which is, I think, why it's really powerful and great to use for advertising and Kickstarters and things like that, because that image can just like pull you in and make you feel something. And if that matches the tone of the book, then like that's really exciting.
Right. Well, is there anything you wish you'd known about indie publishing or working with authors before you started?
I think that it's funny because people think about covers first.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that if you're an illustrator, like you could get into covers. There's a lot more illustrated covers now than there were previously.
Right.
But I actually found it was a lot easier to do maps and character art than to do covers.
Mm-hmm.
I found that there's a lot of people who are interested in it and less illustrators doing it, especially maps.
Mm-hmm.
And that the clients I got were better because character illustration and maps they're like a luxury. They're like a little extra, but you have to have a cover.
Yes.
So I would have people who were a little more further along in their career and had a better idea of what their audience was and what they wanted. And they're less likely to try and lowball me.
Yeah.
Which does happen sometimes.
Willing to pay. Yeah.
Yeah, just because they understand a little bit more of how everything works. And it was just fun. I really loved doing maps. I'm not doing client work anymore, but it was a lot of fun to do all the little details of people's world and their stories and figure out how the world building works and sometimes and things like that. So I would say like look beyond just doing covers, even though it's the obvious thing, because there's a lot of other like bookish illustration things you can get into.
Right.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because so many people are doing special editions, Kickstarters, and illustration is a huge part of that. So talk to us about someone who wants to include special illustrated items with their special editions. Like what advice would you have for somebody who wants to do that? How to go about it?
I think the biggest thing would be to plan like really far in advance if you can. Most illustrators book up well in advance, especially if you want somebody who is of like a good, consistent professional quality. They're probably already booked up 6 months out. So I see a lot of people in the Kickstarter groups being like, I've got a Kickstarter. It's running in a month. I need. So one person to be fair, I think her illustrator had flaked out on her, but she was looking for someone who could do 10 illustrations in 8 weeks. And I was like, you can't. Can't get, like, one person can't do that. So you have to know, like, these things take time. They're usually booked up, and it's worth looking for the people who are the right person rather than whoever is available on Fiverr that day, right? Like, it makes a big difference to your Kickstarter. So I'd have a few options and maybe a backup. I do like to, like I said, I go through Instagram a lot. I've got like a saved folder on my Instagram of people I might think about commissioning. And some of them will say, I'm open for commissions, and those can go fast. So I would have an idea of something you want to commission in the future, even if you don't have like a Kickstarter coming in 2 months kind of thing, but be like, oh, I know I'll need this couple to have a cute illustration. That'd be great. They're a good fit. Like, message them right away. And I also get on waiting lists. So they might say they're not available, but if you email them, they might be meaning they're not available right now. But if you're willing to wait 7 months, they might be able to get a hold of you then.
Okay.
So I would do that. I find that people who are trying to rush it are more likely to get artists who either aren't as good at quality or aren't following best practices and maybe aren't revealing that they're tracing over images they don't have like the rights to, like things off Pinterest or whatever. Like, there's no problem if it's, if you buy stock photos and use them as references. Lots of artists do that. But some of it's not stuff they can legally use, or they'll be using AI, but not saying they're using AI, or saying specifically that they're not using AI, which can be a problem if you're doing a Kickstarter and you're saying to your audience that there's no AI used, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you're not being clear in that messaging and then it comes out, I've seen some people, get called out for things like that, or people recognize that the artist they're using has traced something from another artist. So I think you're more likely to run into problems like that if you're trying to find someone quick and without really having gone through the time to look for it.
Well, kind of piggybacking off of it, I actually have 2 questions, but the first one is, what are the legal issues that people should look out for? Like what are some of the legalities that an author might need to be aware of that they might not be aware of?
I mean, part of it is like, I do always recommend everyone use a contract with their illustrator. I actually have a contract that I used for years in my client work that I'm going to make available to you guys. And I'm not a lawyer. Please don't take this
Neither are
professional
we.
legal advice.
I don't think anyone would mistake us for one, but just in case, we aren't.
Say that.
Yeah.
Because I found a contract in a book about contracts for illustrators, and that is one I have used and adapted for that. So I didn't make it up out of my own head. But it's a really big red flag if they don't want to sign a contract. Like, sometimes like, oh, we don't need to, oh, whatever. I even make my very good friends sign contracts because it has all the expectations laid out of who's going to do what, when, what are the deadlines, what happens if you miss a deadline. A lot of the things you hear about people just disappearing or things like that, I feel like that could be avoided by having someone who's happy to sign a contract. So I think that's part of it. But it's also just good to have a look at the work they've done and make sure that it's really consistent across the board. They can't be tracing things that they don't have rights to. AI is kind of fuzzy, but I do think people can get into a lot of trouble if they're pretending it's not AI and it is AI. So those would be the 2 main things I'd look for. There's also some issues with cover designers who aren't it's not an exact copy of another person's cover, but sometimes it is very, very, very close to the point where I think they're using an eyedropper color picker tool to get the exact same. There's actually a cover that looks very much like one of my covers in my same genre right now. And I'm like, oh, interesting. But if that happens enough times, another designer could choose to sue over that. So I would watch for things like that. Just make sure that, and again, a lot of times consistency in their portfolio will tell you that they have their own style and their own strengths, and that they're not borrowing ideas from all over the place, because it'd be more likely then that something like that could happen.
Yeah. Okay. Could lead to problems. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. So then the second question I have is about price. Can you give us a range of what someone can expect to pay for, let's say, a cover or a map or inside book illustrations or something like that?
Yeah, it's going to depend a lot on complexity. So it's sometimes good to have a back and forth with the illustrator. Sometimes they'll have a price sheet that'll say things like for character design, they might be like, you can get a shoulders up picture of one person for this price. It could be waist up for this price. 2 people, extra this much. Background, extra this much. And you can get an idea then of what it will be. But there is a big range. I would say I generally would not hire anybody who's charging less than $100 because I feel like they're probably not in that zone yet. And I personally can't afford to hire anyone who's over $1,000, even if you know they're doing pretty good. I was charging about $400, $500 for my maps when I was doing them. But that's kind of, it does range quite a bit because it'll depend. Sometimes you can get somebody for not as much money if they're just starting to transition into doing client work and they're building their portfolio. And they need to get enough images to prove that consistency. Like when I started doing maps, I was doing them, I did a couple for free and then I did a couple for like kind of an introductory price to get. And so the quality will still be good, but you know, they don't have the proof quite as much then. So it's a little bit riskier, but you can find some people at that stage. But kind of, it seems like, you know, it's like everything. The more in demand you get, usually you'll start raising your prices a bit because you got to find that balance of how much art you can do to make a living. But it's good to talk to the illustrator because you might like their style and they might come back with a price and you might be like, okay, but can we do something simpler to fit inside my budget? Not be like, I can't pay that. That's too much. But you're like, okay, well, what if there isn't a background on the image? Or what if it's just 1 page instead of 2? Or, you know, things like that. You might be able to find something that doesn't take them as long, so it won't cost quite as much money to do.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And there's going to be probably a difference between epic fantasy cover and a romance illustrated cover. I mean,
There
as far
can
as
be,
price, because of detail, you know, I mean, if you have on either one of them, you know, the more detail you, as you say, the more the price is probably going to be.
Yeah, it's kind of like how long it takes usually, right, for them to do.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's totally okay to talk to your illustrator and say, "This is what I've budgeted. What
can I get for
options
that?
do I have? And I love this, but I don't think I can afford this. What could we do to it?" Right? It's okay. Illustrators are not going to be offended if you talk to them and say, "This is, I want to use you, but my budget is limited. So can we work together?" Right? They're not.
Is there anything that we can do within that? Like I'd have people come to me and asking about like a complicated, more realistic character illustration, and those are pretty expensive. But I was also doing little chibi illustrations, so they're like the little kind of short, cute anime style characters. And I did those for pretty inexpensively because I could reuse kind of the body and the face from other ones because they're all just kind of the same little thing. And they were very simple, so they didn't take as long. So I'd be like, well, this can be $100 instead of $600. Is that going to work? Like, is that still something that would work well for your audience or your Kickstarter or whatever? Because they just might not know the options.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a lot of us. We don't really know what's possible and if it's okay to ask certain things. We don't want to offend anyone, you know, so this is, I think, will be helpful to help people realize what they can ask and what they should look for. Are there any other common mistakes that you see when people are doing illustration and special editions that you were like, hey, watch out for this?
I think that's most of it. I was gonna say, just like don't try and be too cheap. If you can't afford it, just try and scale back your vision a little bit and then maybe run a couple Kickstarters and see if you can then do more stuff. Like you don't always have to have more and more and more, right? Just like I think one good quality piece will go a lot further than 8 interior illustrations that are not really that exciting for the readers. So I would say, I think that's probably the main thing. And I would say also with all these communications, illustrators are very susceptible to flattery. So like all creative people. So if you get in there with, I love your art so much. I would love to work with you because I think my readers would really enjoy this. And then like keep that energy up throughout the thing. It's very discouraging if you have spent hours working on a piece and the author is like, okay, good, here's your money. And you're like, okay, did you like it though? You know? Because you did put a lot of yourself into your art. So I'm like, it's always nice to like really let them know. And even like you can ask for changes and refinements and things like that. That's very normal. They will not be offended. I just would always do that. Again, make sure you tell them the things you do like. Like with that hand, you would have been like, oh, this part's so good on this cover, but could we work on these couple things? And then back to like, well, my readers are going to love it because like the emotion's so good. Little compliment sandwich. But I do think that goes a long way, and it also keeps them knowing what you think is working well, so they don't accidentally like edit out the stuff you loved about it.
Yeah, that would be horrible. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, tell us about your creative business and how you went about setting it up and how that might have changed over the years.
Yeah, like I said, I started out as an illustrator, and I do feel that it's interesting talking to other creative people because I love to tell stories and I love to write, but I kind of feel like my like core self is still an artist. Like I have to draw pretty much every day, or I feel like I am not myself. But unfortunately for my readers, I do not have to write every day to not feel myself. And I do think, like, when I started out, I was like, okay, well, I can do my covers for my books. That'll be fun. And then I one day was like, wait a minute. I like called my mother. She laughed at me. I was like, I just realized I could illustrate them. I'm like, no one's going to stop me. I don't have a publisher. And she was like,
it's okay. You're allowed to do that.
So it was very funny. So what I did,
I'm running with scissors.
Yeah.
No one's going to stop me. I did then like start illustrating my novels. They're not like every page is not an illustration. But my kind of the sections, I split them up into the parts each have a big illustration, and there's a map and the illustrated chapter headers that go along with it and all of that. And like that really like is fulfilling to me as a writer and an artist and a storyteller to be able to like have all this tied together. And my readers did enjoy it, but I was starting to get a little bit discouraged because Amazon does not care if your books are pretty. Like really. And I outsell, like most people outsell my print books. My ebooks go a lot further. Like I'm selling a lot more ebooks. And the illustration was slowing me down because it took me longer to put a book out. And I was like, it's maybe not even worth doing this, making these beautiful books if it's causing me to like make less money and sell less books because it's slowing me down. But that was like very hurt my heart because that is what I love. And I'm so proud of how my books are and how lovely they are, and that they're really an expression of like the whole thing is the art, right? Like the entire book. So it was a little bit rough. And I was also doing more and more client work, which was great because I enjoy doing client work and I love working with other authors. But I found that after my first book came out, I was getting more work, which was great. But I was always prioritizing client work over my own because they're my clients and they paid and they have a deadline. But my own deadlines just kind of were very fluid. So I would put out my ebook and then the print book would come a little later because I wasn't quite done it. So with my second book, it came out like 6 months later. And then with my third novel I just finished, it actually came out a full year later. And then it was Kickstarter. So it took quite a while. I only now, it's been a little over a year, have some of the backers, all my paperback backers finally have their books. The hardcovers are still printing. So all of that, I had to make the choice to stop doing client work, which was hard, but it kind of freed me up to be able to think about what I want to do with these two parts of myself. And I jumped ahead to Kickstarter, but Kickstarter, when I started seeing it, I was like, oh, this is amazing because it showcases how pretty the books are. And it allows that it's that personal connection that you don't get on Amazon. And I love, love, love to connect with my reading community. So, and to really be the person behind the books and not just have books. Like on Amazon, it's just like a book. There's like a tiny little picture of you. But on Kickstarter, you get to really be like, I'm a creator. These are the things I make. This is my heart. This is what I love. Like, are you excited about it too, kind of thing? And it's a much better business model for me because it really allows my strengths to shine through. So I was very excited about it. I did my first Kickstarter it was for my third novel in the series, but I did it for like all three. You know, you could get all three books in that like kind of. They still match the other ones, but they had some extras. I could do like the pretty end papers and a few things like that. And it funded way better than I thought it was going to. I was very excited. I'm still very much on a release, month, I might break $1,000. For the rest of the time, I'm hitting the mid hundreds in there. And I funded it for almost $24,000 Canadian. And I was like,
wow.
what? It was also terrifying because then I had all that money in my bank until I finished the books. Don't run Kickstarters until you have finished everything, guys. It was very stressful. I still had a lot of art to do. The book itself was written, but I had to do all the rest of it. But it was just very exciting. I got new readers, which is so hard to do, these days. Just like cold without advertising. They just find you on Kickstarter, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I was very excited about that. Even though I said I'd have their books in October and they're getting them in February and March, but they're very forgiving. And I'm definitely going to be running like all my releases from now on, I think, are going to go to Kickstarter first because they're as excited as I am about making the books fun, right? And then they can go on Amazon and the people who just want the ebook can still get the ebook and everybody, has a good time. So I think that's really cool. And then last summer, I also started experimenting with Patreon because, again, I just love community and I was getting really frustrated with social media. We used to be able to build community on social media. Like when I started on Instagram, like I loved Instagram and it was such a good place to just meet people and hang out. And you felt like you're having the interactions with the same people and you're making friends. And it's not like it's terrible now, but it's a fraction of
it's not the same.
What it was.
It's not the same. Yeah.
It's sad. And I have a Facebook group, but like people, you'll put out a post. I've got 300 members and it's like, it reached 16. And I was like, thanks a bunch, Facebook. The more I want to communicate a message, the more Facebook like hides that particular post.
Yeah.
It's like they know.
Yeah.
Oh, they do know. I'm sure they know. I don't know. So I was like, well, with Patreon, like if they sign up, they get an email every time you have a post. So I started off with a free Patreon and I did a little read along for one of my novellas and stuff. And my engagement was so much higher than it had been on social media. It was really, really impressive. And again, I love to share art. I love to do video. And it allowed me to do all those things really well, whereas some of the other ones were a little bit iffy. And like, I was trying to do videos for Reels and TikToks. And again, you're like, I spend an hour or more. I don't want to say how long I spend. Jamie, sometimes you're like, wow, that was half my day. And then it's like, we showed 200 people and none of them cared. Cool. And none of them were people who were following you. And
nope. They had nothing to say. Yeah, exactly.
Random people out there. So I love being able to get, that interaction because I love to hang out with my readers and chat with them. And then this winter, my friends sat me down for an intervention and told me I was doing a million things for free and then wondering why I'm not making money. And they're like, you do all this stuff. So I am transitioning now last Saturday. So what is it? Today is Wednesday to fully paid tiers on my Patreon. And I'm scaling back on social media. I'm still posting, but I've got some PAs helping me out for some of that. Still running the Facebook group, but not putting as much as myself into it and all my energy. Pulling back my newsletter a bit, which is very frightening and not what anyone tells you to do. So I'll let you know how it goes. But running all paid tiers on Patreon. So we'll see if my free trial people all go through. I'll be at $100 a month at my launch here, which is enough to make me feel like that this might work. So
it's a great start.
Yeah. I'm excited. I was scared because I'm cutting off a lot of this free stuff. And I'm like, I know, guys, I'm sorry. But the bottom tier is only $1 a month. So maybe we can still do this. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to start running some ads and trying to do some different things to it. But again, it lets me do like share all of the things I love and not just the words. And, you know, and I get to hang out with them and we have tea parties and they know my cat and, you know, it's a good time for me. So fingers crossed.
I think that's a great
goes well.
setup, especially for you, since you have so much to give on the illustration side. And it sounds like that is like a perfect match for you to bring your readers in and say, let's do things together and we'll hang out over here on Patreon. It seems like a great fit for you.
I've got it set up as like an extension of my world building. It's called the Royal Library of Tirnanog because we're in fairy, public fairyland in mine. And I've got a little jackalope mascot that I made a banner image of, and I'm going to change him every season to like, you know, tweak it to be like the spring version and things like that so they can have their little buddy. So I am hoping that it's just can be, you know, a cozy, magical place, which I feel like we could all maybe use right now. It's a little stressful out there, guys. And social media gets a little stressful because you find a lot of stuff you're like not trying to find out there. So
not at all.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
Sounds like a great plan. I love it.
Yeah.
It's a good plan. We'll see how the execution goes.
Yeah. Well, what's the best thing you think you've done to set yourself up for success?
Other than having a mother who was already an author. Everyone should do that. Go get a mom who anyway, I do a couple things. One is that I can't like take any credit for this, but I'm part of a really wonderful author mastermind group. And I think that just like not doing things on your own is so great to have friends who are looking out for you and who have different skill sets than you have. I was lucky. I was in a Facebook group and someone asked for like people who were on Instagram who want to do those comment pods. This is like 5 or 6 years ago where we try and comment on each other's posts to get, you know, boosted a bit. And then we kind of made some of us into a little group on Facebook, and then COVID hit and we were all lonely. So we started meeting once a week on Zoom, and we have ever since. So having them and that accountability and just the friendships there, I think has been really, really huge. And then this year, I think the thing that's helping the most in the past year is just really trying to look to my strengths. We're just not, you know, you've interviewed so many people. Like we do not all work the same way. And some of us are never, ever, ever going to win the game of writing a lot of books that are trendy. Like we're just not gonna, like I can't win that game. So I have to play a different game.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Very wise.
You know, it's my gray hair.
Yeah.
Oh, that is all wonderful. And I think that it'll be really helpful for people listening. They'll get a lot of good tips from this. So tell people, we'll have the contract in the show notes, but tell people where they can find out more about you and your books and Patreon and your Kickstarter and all that.
Yeah. I am Hanna Sandvig. There's no H at the end of my name most places. I am still posting on Instagram pretty regularly, and it's an easy place to like reach out and chat with me, which is part of the reason that I'm still there. And then it's the same on Facebook. It just like cross posts. But if you follow me on Kickstarter or if you check out my Patreon, again, both are just Hanna Sandvig, then you can see kind of what I was talking about. You can still see my past Kickstarter. Kickstarter is so amazing for that. You can snoop on everybody and see, you know, like all the stuff they wrote up and how it all went. And then when I launch a new one, you'd be able to see that as well. And then Patreon, again, it's just Patreon/Hanna Sandvig. You do have to join for $1 to see a lot of the stuff, but there is a 7-day free trial. But you could kind of just also see the vibe I have set up if you're curious about that. But I'm always happy to chat about it too. So you can hit me up.
Great.
Especially if you're an artist. I love talking to other author illustrators because I feel like there's not a ton of us, and it's always exciting to run into more.
Yeah.
To find your people. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And we do things a little different, so it's good to connect, I think.
Very true. Yes. Well, we will have all those links in the show notes. And I think that this has been great. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us and answer all our questions.
I've learned something. Yeah.
It was really fun. Yeah. It's good to talk to you guys.
All right. Well, if y'all want the show notes, those will be at wishidknownforwriters.com. And if you want to support the podcast, you can go to that same link /support. And we will see everybody next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.